Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
A lot's been happening in Pakistan, and Pakistani army is at the heart of what's going on, as it always does. So as I told you some time back, that we started recording the video version of National Interest only towards the later half of 2017. A lot of what we have written before that, generally between 2014 and 2017. Up to 2014, we took out a selection and published that in a book, Anticipating India, although that was a selection mostly of my political columns. The new selection is now in the works, so you should see it out in the markets by the time the results of this election come. Meanwhile, what I'm doing is, I am also giving you the video version of some of these key columns, or what I consider to be the key columns of this period. One, so that they remain in both mediums, that is in print as well as video and audio, which is very important these days. Also those of you who follow National Interest only through the video and audio method, or those platforms, they also get access to these. In fact, this article was published in September 24, 2016. The print had not yet come into being as a platform. So here we go, just when Pakistan's army has hijacked their election and installed a government they wanted in power and put the one who probably won this election in jail. His key people are all in jail. At that point, see our view on Pakistan army and tell me if you think much has changed since then. Chances are it hasn't. Pakistan's military, we said, is a formidable force that has consistently failed its country, its nation. The problem is, nobody in Pakistan can dare question it. Imran Khan did so, and see, he's in jail now. What's your view on Pakistan's army? What's your view? Is it a good army or a bad army, a great army or an evil army? Is it an invincible army or eminently beatable army? Is it a Pakistani nationalist army or just another Islamic Lashkar in uniform with nukes? Tanks, fighter planes and nukes? The answer can depend on which side you happen to be on. As an Indian partisan, I can of course use all or some of the many positive choices given here, positive attributes given here, but I will then have to spend all my life, rest of my life, in exile somewhere. Or we can be like our primetime warriors and simply continue to insist that Pakistani army is exactly as portrayed in Bollywood quote-unquote war movies, such as they are. Our idea of these movies give us our idea of commando comics: bumbling, cowardly, easy to roll over, and unsoldierly, particularly when faced with a Sunny Deol or even a lesser equivalent of him, like say Sunil Shetty or Akshay Kumar. Do the Pakistani Faujis have a chance against them? A clinical, professional assessment of the Pakistani army, its mind, its motivations, track record, and ongoing thought processes is, however, the most crucial need for those analyzing, debating, and most importantly, guarding the national interest in India. The essential complication and challenge of dealing with Pakistan is resolving multiple dilemmas. Are Pakistan, the ideological state, and its army the same entity or different? Can you deal with the state and people and leave aside the army, or vice versa? And if you have to deal with both the people and the army of Pakistan, who do you deal with first? Is it possible even to do so? My own greatest motivation as I psych myself into writing National Interest every Friday afternoon is a complexity. I need a complexity to write on. We are professional writers. We can do wordsmithy and spin 1300 words anytime without a problem. But you need the challenge of a complexity to keep the creative juices churning. A complexity makes you search for answers which are open to arguments. In all honesty, however, I'm not able to tick each one of the negative boxes out of the choice of adjectives for Pakistan's army that I had listed: bad, evil, eminently beatable, just an Islamic Lashkar, and be done with it. That will be enormously fashionable today, but not a view professional soldiers in our own army would have taken of their arch enemies. That's why they come out on top in the final analysis in every military engagement since 1947. When in doubt on what is best for your own skin, find an eminent foreigner to make your point. I will therefore borrow a line from Professor Stephen P. Cohen, globally respected scholar on India and Pakistan and their armies. In his seminal book, The Pakistan Army, 1984, Himalayan Books, that's the publisher. I repeat, what did Steve Cohen say? That Pakistan's is the finest army in the world that never won a war. Ziaul Haq would lionize Steve Cohen, invite him for a meal anytime he was in town, but he banned his book. Why? Because he said, how could you say this army never won a war? What about 1965? Today, the Pakistani army might also believe that it won a second war against the Soviets in Afghanistan and maybe a third against the Americans fighting on the side of the Taliban. This is the real problem with the Pakistani army. It is because its brains sit not in its head but elsewhere that it has not only institutionalized the thought that it won in 1965, it has also now built a self-hypnosis observing September 6th as the Defense of Pakistan Day, holding parades and displays, perpetuating this myth and mystery. The problem in Pakistan is at most points of time, and definitely at this point of time, nobody would dare to question it. In India, you can get away with saying, based on the works of many scholars, many soldiers who recorded the history of 1965, that it was a war of mutual incompetence that led to a stalemate within 3 weeks. But not in Pakistan, you can't say this. Pakistan's army has a lot going for it. It is a formidable fighting force and still the only sizable Islamic army in the world capable of absorbing modern technology and following orders of its commanders like professionals and take casualties in real combat. Its problem is it sees its role as being much wider, greater ideological, moral and even holier than that of any professional military. That is where problems arise for their country and ours as well, for India as well. Pakistan is going through a phase unprecedented in its politico-military history, when the GHQ has not seized power openly, but controls it fully. In a series of maneuvers, since the last elections installed Nawaz Sharif with a full majority, remember I wrote this article in 2016, I could be writing it now. It destroyed not just the political but even the moral authority of the government. People by and large and the intelligentsia would have more faith in the army as an institution than in the elected government of the lazy thieves. That name Imran Khan invented. General Raheel Sharif, who hailed from one of Pakistan's most illustrious family of war heroes, his brother won Pakistan's highest gallantry award in 1971 and his uncle the same highest gallantry award, the Pakistani equivalent of Paramveer Chakra in 1965. He was then seen as a hero. The chief today probably is not seen as a hero by the most, and yet nobody would dare to question him. At which point we can raise our trick question. Does the Pakistani army deserve the kind of awe and respect that it gets in their country? Has it done enough to deserve it? For the answers, consider what it promised. If its central premise behind justifying its preeminent position was winning Kashmir, it has failed after 75 years of fighting. In fact, today Pakistan has less of Kashmir than it had in 1948 at ceasefire, having lost all of Siachen and territory in Kargil, Turtuk, etc. in 1971. If the proposition was that only the Pakistani army can protect the country's territorial and ideological frontiers, it vaporizes the moment you mention the word Bangladesh. Because if Pakistan was an ideology, Bangladesh destroyed it. Pakistan lost a large part of its territory and a majority of its population, thus knocking its ideological basis of two-nation theory entirely. An independent Bangladesh now is doing much better than Pakistan. If its claim to preeminence is that it defeated the Soviets, the fact is it is still fighting the Afghans. Soviets or maybe even the Americans, but it's still fighting the Afghans and the Taliban and also their jihadi offspring within its own territories. Over these decades, this wanted army has lost Pakistan territory, ideology, financial and intellectual capital, ruined its institutions, democracy, the respect for its passport, and like it or not, it has reduced Pakistan's status to a globally acknowledged University of Jihad, Ivy League or not. This comes at the cost of much of the country's budget. Time to repeat a telling point I have made often enough. When I first went to Pakistan in the summer of 1985, the country looked so much better off than India, so much richer and modern than ours. It had to, because its per capita income was then 65% higher than India's. The average Pakistani was 65% richer than an average Indian. That is about the time it chose, encouraged by Afghanistan, to start using cross-border terror as an instrument of diplomacy and power, as a weapon against India, hoping India will bleed, decline and die. On the contrary, India has risen and Pakistan has hit a new depth. A 65% lead on per capita income in 1985 is now nearly 35 to 40% deficit. This widening deficit is a net result of India's higher growth rate and Pakistan's higher population growth rate. Pakistan's army has therefore lost its captive nation, the war, whatever its claims to the many battles it had fought, very well with ours, for example. Its joy at orchestrating the deaths of a few Indians once in a while is no more than a self-destructive delusion. It is the finest army in the world. Pakistan's is the finest army in the world that's destroying its own country first.